What makes the perfect kick? That's a good question. Lucky for you, I spent hours studying Disclosure's signature kick in crazy detail. LUFS, length, transients, tuning, layers, how to make it, and so much more. So if you're like me and chasing the perfect kick, you're gonna love this video. Every kick has three main elements: a transient, a body, and a tail. The transient is the tiny click at the start. The body is kind of the punchy bit that hits you in your chest. And the tail is really the subtail. So this is the overall kick. Now we have the transient, body, and the subtail. If you think about kicks in this way, it's just much easier to solve problems because instead of fixing your sort of overall kick, you can figure out exactly which section needs fixing. So after spending hours studying Disclosure kicks, here's what I found. First up, we have the kick transient. So the kick transients are all very dark. Like if you were to take just a more EDM style kick, you'll notice the Disclosure kicks are darker and less clicky. So here's an example. In fact, that's where we get to the kick body. A lot of Disclosure's kick body, you'll notice, is actually behind the bass, meaning the bass actually takes up more space in the mix. Let me just play some quick loops and just listen to the kick level versus the bass level. You still hear the kick, it's still there, but the bass is actually more the focus. Then when we talk about the kick tail, it's also really, really short, mostly around an 1/8 note, but sometimes it even gets closer to a 16th note, which is tiny. So I cut kicks from 9 or 10 Disclosure records. This would be the full quarter note, right? And now if I go a step further and I isolate it to the core of the kick drum, they all look a little bit different, they all sound a little bit different, the frequencies are all a little bit different, but they're all short. You can see most of them are closer to an 1/8 note. Some of them, if we zoom in, are actually closer to a 16th note. This is an 1/8 note, and then you can see the final sort of 25% of these kicks or so, closer to a 16th note. So just all this is space for something else. Let's talk about the envelope of the kicks too, which is really, really important. And Disclosure has a really good tip for this later in the video. So the envelope is basically how the sound behaves over time, or basically how the transient and body fade into the tail. A lot of the times we'll see a Disclosure kick start a bit higher up in the 73 Hertz range, and then it'll fade down to a lower subby note. So when making a kick, Disclosure usually starts with the plugin Big Kick. Then they sometimes add a few layers, which I'll show you later in the video. By the way, the Kick plugin is actually 40% off right now. If you want to support the channel, use the link below. It's an affiliate link, and it really does help.
Can you explain how you go about Big Kick? I just have my go-to setting, which I'm happy to show you guys. I like it because it lets me, synthesize the kick. It lets me shape it. Hopefully by me messing with these knobs, you can see like the difference of what it does. So, the bass note of the synth is a synth. It's not a sample. It's not a real kick drum. It's being created within this. I don't really have a go-to process. I have my preset when I load it up, which is something like that. And then I'll tune the kick if it needs it in key with the song, mess with the attack. I usually mess with this the most, the decay, because that's the length of the kick. But yeah, for this tune, it just needed a short, punchy kick because there's such a busy bass line. You don't want a big boom, boom, boom going on at the same time as dun 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 dun. That's going to be, way too busy. Punchy kick, busy bass line.
It's also worth talking about layering. When it comes to layering, more isn't better. If you don't know what you're doing, you can actually create some phase issues, meaning all the layering was for nothing. So it's worth figuring out what your kick is missing and asking if you'd be better off with a new kick or just a new layer.
Could you speak about layering the kicks? Yeah, sure. Sub. For the body. This one's for the punch. But, you know, see, I'm taking out a lot of the sub there. If I put that back in. So I'm using that one much more for like a, and then the sub is doing the stuff that you feel, you know, at the festival. And then there's a couple of like more of a clicky. Yeah, so that's doing like the top end of the kick.
The next thing to consider is a pitch envelope. This can be a cool way to add a nice little punch.
And then the main kick, battery 8082, going through the volume envelope, and I've given it some pitch envelope here too. I find this very useful in battery. You can add punch or subtract punch from your kick. So here's without. Let me just give it a bit more length so you can hear what it does. So that's a normal 808. And then with the pitch. Just hear all that like 100 hertz. It's just giving it pop. I can exaggerate it a bit. So that's the kicks all together.
Okay, the next thing to talk about is what I call frequency guides. I found it's a really cool way to analyze kicks and sub bass as well. So what I did was create a frequency guide. So if your goal is to sound like kind of a disclosure record, emulating this sort of bass curve is probably a good idea. The kick loudness is going to peak at the same levels. The very lows of the sub are going to extend to the same levels, and it's just going to get you a record that's closer to your target. So if I play these snippets from disclosure records, so instead of just saying, you know, you don't like your kick, you can get more specific and see which part needs work. So if we load up this Oliver kick, we can see it's a little bit loud, around 50, and we can see it's a little loud in the sub range. There we go, that's a little closer to the goal. And then if we wanted to, you know, we could cut a little bit with the EQ down here. Again, if you know what your goal is, this is a tool to help get you there. To wrap things up, there's 3 big takeaways. 1, there's no perfect kick. It comes down to genre and taste. 2, disclosure uses short kicks higher up in the sub range, which leaves a lot of space for a busy bass line. 3, I think disclosure mixdowns are a lot more like pop records than a typical house record, meaning the overall kick level is probably a few dBs lower than you'd find in melodic house or Afro house, EDM, big room, for example. If you want more videos like this, give me a signal, like, comment, subscribe, share, whatever. And if you enjoyed this video, here's a few more that pair nicely.
Hit down.